Hello, this is Julia Fisher welcoming you to the Olive Tree. For the past 2 weeks, we've been hearing the story of Chrissy Rogers, who came from the US to the UK, found herself working for Prayer for Israel, then together with Simon Elman and Helen Shapiro, formed the vocal gospel trio called Hebron. But there is more to Chrissy's story, because she's also very involved with a mission called Messianic Testimony, which has its roots way back in the 1800s. Listen as Chrissy explained how this came about.
I became acquainted with Messianic Testimony when I toured here in the late 70s, early 80s. Messianic Testimony also was not very self-promoting. It quietly got on with its work. And I had invitations to come and lead singing at their AGMs and so forth. And it was just one of many things that I came into contact with during those days. When I moved here in 1988, again, I heard sort of whispers of Messianic Testimony. I met people who were workers, but I didn't actually become involved until I was invited through Simon Elman's involvement. Now, Simon Elman is a full-time worker with Messianic Testimony. And obviously, being my colleague, I became more appreciative of the work and more knowledgeable of its roots. And it was through Simon's involvement that Hebron were invited to lead worship at an AGM, which we did. And it was after that that, out of the blue, the director of the work invited me to consider becoming a trustee of Messianic Testimony. Now, that was quite oblique to me. I wasn't expecting anything like that, and I'd certainly never been a trustee anywhere. But I prayed about it, and the Lord gave me that green light. And so I stepped in at that level and began to learn much more about the work from that position. And I really gained such a deep appreciation, especially upon learning the history of the work. It's one of the UK's oldest missions to the Jewish people. And in its day, it was the largest mission of any kind in the UK. It was huge back in the 1800s. It has quite a catalog of those who supported it, names that are household names to this day of men of God. So it was, as a trustee, gaining a burden for the work and seeing the shoulders that I was standing on. The main essence of it, it is the gospel to Jewish people.
You've really found yourself in some very, very interesting, challenging situations in your life. But this, you were beginning to tell me, this was a truly historic organization that was very prominent in its day in the 1800s. And as you mentioned, people like Hudson Taylor, C.H. Spurgeon, George Muller, they were all involved in this. But the man, John Wilkinson, who founded it, is that where it really all started?
Yes, he got saved as a result of a Wesleyan revival in Lincoln. And the Lord called him to the Jewish people when he was of age. At first, he worked for another society that began in 1809 called the British Society for the Promotion of the Gospel Among the Jews. What happened as part of that, and he was very proficient in Hebrew, he studied the Talmud, he was very, very well equipped as a Gentile believer to reach Jewish people. And he had great fruit in his ministry. However, he was so gifted that he also would tour and speak to churches about the need to bring the gospel to Jewish people. Because what was happening in those days was the Napoleonic Wars were causing huge upheavals, and Jewish people were flooding out of Russia and swelling the ranks here in the East End of London. And he and others who were biblically alert realized that at some point, Israel was going to become a nation again, because it was still Palestine. It was still mandated back then. But they realized that they were being given the opportunity of all these Jewish people coming to the UK to witness to them before they would then leave, in their understanding, very soon to go to Israel. So that created a real groundswell of Jewish missions. And John Wilkinson himself, like I say, he was so gifted in reaching Christians about this and raising funds for the mission that the Society for the Promotion of the Gospel wanted to just keep him going to churches and keep him away from witnessing to Jewish people because he was so gifted at fundraising. And he felt frustrated. So he branched out on his own. And in 1876, he founded the Mildmay Mission to the Jews, his own organization. And he concentrated. It was a faith work. He didn't go around overtly fundraising, as it were. He would speak in churches, of course, to raise an awareness of the importance of Bible prophecy and what was happening.
It's amazing, isn't it, Chrissy, when you think about it? This is so long before Israel was actually a sovereign state again, yet they were anticipating that God was working, was on the move. It was going to happen.
That's right. They saw it very clearly, as did the other men that you referred to. Hudson Taylor, he used to send his tithe to the Malmö mission with a note saying, to the Jew first. And John Wilkinson would send his tithe back to Hudson Taylor and say, to the Gentile second.
Yes.
George Muller originally wanted to go to the Jewish people. And of course, Charles Spurgeon's famous Shankbone sermon was the fruit of having John Wilkinson preach at the Metropolitan Tabernacle. They were very close. It was all happening in those days, an awareness of the reality of Bible prophecy.
So you have come in at a time where it's really challenging. I mean, they had huge support, as you say, from many, many churches and leading people. How are you finding it today?
Exactly the opposite. I'm sad to report. Our workers that are out there, a normal part of being a missionary, if you want to use that term, is deputation. So a worker is out at the coalface. After a while, he comes and then does a little tour, speaking at supporting churches to give updates on how the work is going. Quite a few of our workers find it very difficult to get invitations to churches, even though there may be supporters within those churches. One of the things that I've started doing after becoming part of Messianic Testimony is organizing regional rallies so that we could find at least one church that is sympathetic and supportive of the work, and then invite people from all around the surrounding region to come who are supportive of the work or who want to find out more. So you'll see within Messianic Testimony, there may be deputation work going on quietly, but we're trying to reach out to as many of the supporters as we can who are lone voices in their own churches, but so that they can come together and hear from us, from the workers, what's happening. So it's a very, very different world. And when I became a trustee in 2011, sad to say, part of the burden that fell upon me so heavily was the fact that Messianic Testimony, such a richly heritaged work, was about to close its doors because of lack of support. Now, I don't want to do anything in my own strength either. It's prayer. It's seeking the Lord for what he wants to do. It's his work, and it's his decree whether it stands or falls, as long as we're righteous before him. But I believe it's his work, and he's sustained it all these years.
So who is listening to you? Where are the pockets of support in the UK, would you say?
I would have to say we have a lot of support from Northern Ireland.
That's interesting.
We have a lot of support from Wales, if I'm going to try to break it down like that. We've had rallies in London. For some years, we were having rallies right in central London on Oxford Street. But we found ourselves in great jeopardy on each of the rally days because Oxford Street can be taken over by this demonstration and that demonstration. I mean, we found ourselves one day being faced with a Palestinian demonstration coming right down the street in front of us, intimidating people who were coming in. So London is difficult. So we've had to break that down into several smaller rallies. West Midlands, we have good support from up there. It's central enough that people can travel in. But again, finding whole churches that support, it's not easy.
So how can people find out about it? I know you've got a website. There's a wonderful film on there that you've made that tells the story of Messianic Testimony and the history behind it. How can people find out about you? What are your hopes and dreams?
Again, we're not that big on self-promotion. We don't do things on Facebook. There are many reasons for this, okay? I refer to Messianic Testimony as one of the UK's best-kept secrets because there is a huge area where we could come under attack from the Jewish anti-missionary element. And even though we're more unknown than some of the other American import Jewish missions, we were singled out last year in the Jewish press as people to be wary of and watch out for. So it's a double-edged sword. If we were to come out to full force and publicize widely, that could shut down the very work we're trying to do. So it's just prayer. How can people find out? People stumble across us. Our Hebron concerts, we do refer to Messianic Testimony and invite people to sign up for more information. And people do respond. It's very grassroots.
So primarily you would describe yourself as a missionary?
Yes, in the classic sense of that term, yes. That's not a term that Jewish people take kindly to. So we avoid using it in Jewish circles. But yes, we're Jewish missionaries.
And so you are meeting with Jewish people one-on-one and...
Yes. In the words of another very well-known Jewish missionary, witnessing to Jewish people and bringing the gospel, it's hand-picked fruit. It's not massive harvest at the moment. It's one-on-one. It's slow. It's patient. Jewish people do get wary. There's a lot of historical reasons for that. We understand that. It's a slow burn. But, even the Lord said to Isaiah, when Isaiah had that devastating experience with the Lord in chapter 6, he said, "Here am I, Lord, send me." He didn't say, "Here am I, Lord, I'll go, send me." The Lord Jesus said, "Pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers." So even when the Lord does send somebody, he showed Isaiah very clearly that it was going to be an uphill struggle. They're not going to see, they're not going to hear until such time. So we're patient and try to be faithful.
And where do you find the majority of Jewish communities are currently in the UK? Surely they are in the cities, in London, in Manchester,
Right.
Places like that.
Yeah, Manchester, Leeds, that's right. Well, there's Glasgow, there's a good Jewish community there. There are probably smaller pockets around. They exist everywhere. I mean, even at your church in Loxwood, an Israeli lady came that first concert, that she'd lived in your village for 40 years. Nobody even knew her. But her first question to me in Hebrew was, "I need to know what happens to me when I die."
Wow.
But where the Jewish communities are, you do find there are a lot of Jewish mission organizations that can make Jewish people a bit more wary. It's not an easy work. It's probably the hardest but most important work that we can do as a believer.
Chrissy, it's been so good talking to you. Thank you for sharing your story, the story of Hebron, and the story of Messianic Testimony. It's been good and we're grateful to you. Thank you.
It's been a joy and a pleasure. Thank you, Julia. Thank you for inviting me.
You've been listening to Chrissy Rogers and the story of Messianic Testimony, one of the oldest missionary organizations in the UK. The Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund is a Christian charity based in the UK that supports the needs of both Jewish believers and Arab or Palestinian Christians living in Israel and the wider Middle East. If you'd like to know more about our work and receive our free bi-monthly newsletter, please visit our website, olivetreefund.org. Meanwhile, join me at the same time next week for another story from the Olive Tree. Until then, goodbye.